Saturday, September 11th, 2001. New York, Virginia, and Pennsylvania honor the victims of 9/11 with heartfelt tributes and moments of silence. Meanwhile, in Florida, former President Donald Trump and his son Donald Jr. enjoyed an evening of leather-smacking flesh at Triller Fight Club. 58-year-old Evander Holyfield laced up the boxing gloves for the first time in over 10 years to take on former UFC light heavyweight champ Vitor Belfort. Trump and his son were live in Miami to provide alternate commentary for the entire night of fights. So how was Donald Sr. and Jr.'s time at the commentary booth? How much do they actually know about the sweet science? And how did they find ways to make the event about themselves? I'm Matthew, video editor and fight analyst at The Recount. Let's go ahead and take a look. The 45th president is no stranger to combat sports, as many of the casinos Trump once owned in Atlantic City held boxing or MMA events almost every weekend, ranging from the UFC or Showtime Sports to tiny local promotions in the Mid-Atlantic area. Boardwalk Hall saw many famous bouts, including Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward's final match from their historic trilogy, Mike Tyson knocking out Michael Spinks, and Evander's match against George Foreman. Back when mixed martial arts was still banned in more states than it was permitted, Trump was a strong proponent of the sport, and many of his casinos housed UFC events early in the Zuffa era. Trump briefly dabbled in promoting MMA as well when he partnered with Affliction MMA back in 2008. Acting as a face of the company and holding no real power whatsoever, Trump Towers was used as their base of New York City press conferences until the company folded right before their third show. There's also a strong possibility that these events helped build Trump's relationship with Russia, as Vladimir Putin had a vested interest in the then undefeated Russian heavyweight Fedor Emelianenko. Before the fights even began, Trump participated in a press Q&A session, where he was asked who would win in a fight between him and Joe Biden, which the Florida fans in attendance reveled in.
I think Biden would go down within the first few seconds.
The first few seconds?
Trump did visit New York before heading to the Sunshine State, but it wasn't for the same memorial that President Biden attended on site. Instead, Trump altered his plans and paid a surprise visit to a New York City police precinct and firehouse before jet-setting off to Florida. He used his time there to rant about President Biden and continued to push the big lie that he is the true commander-in-chief.
We won the election, but what are you going to do? What this government of ours did in the last week is never going to be excused, ever.
The Trumps were joined on commentary alongside a rotating group, including former WWE commentator Todd Grisham, former UFC heavyweight champion Junior Dos Santos, and Jorge Masvidal, who aided Trump's re-election campaign and joined him on his Florida tour called Fighters Against Socialism. Fact-checking the info Trump rattled off, he remembered mostly everything very well, or only slightly off. He claimed that George Foreman was knocking out people at 47 years old, but in reality, Foreman was 45 when he earned his last knockout victory. Trump also claimed that Tyson's KO of Spinks was 92 seconds, when its official ring time was 91. So nothing egregious here, or at least nothing nearly as bad as Snoop Dogg's awkward, superimposed musical performance with Marvin Gaye, because yes, that was also a thing that happened at this show. Trump was adamant in not picking a winner in any of the fights, preferring to let the matches unfold without bias. He's been around enough fights to know that anything can happen at any moment, so it was a surprising bit of maturity you wouldn't expect from the same person who refused to accept a legitimate election result and encouraged an insurrection over it. All in all, the polarizing president said nothing about boxing that would be worth nitpicking over. Perhaps he missed his true calling as a boxing commentator after all. Politics came up less than you might expect, although early in the night, Trump maintained his belief that the 2020 election was rigged and that he won it, and also repeated earlier comments about how Biden handled the exit from Afghanistan poorly, a situation Trump himself set up during his time in office. Trump also mentioned that he was given the high honor of the Bay of Pigs Award by Cuban Americans in Florida, a claim he has made for some time, although no such actual award exists. If you didn't pick up on the tone of this event, it was almost more fervidly MAGA political than a Trump election rally, including Todd Grisham's incessant pandering to the former president and constant chants of "We want Trump" and demands for 45 to address the crowd. Of course, he obliged at the end of the night to declare his love of the patriots living in Florida. However, no mention of a return to politics was made. Now, I watched this event on Fight TV, which included a live chat with other viewers at home filled with Trumpers writing racist messages and calling Donald Sr. the true president. I can't even show you half the stuff I saw here because we'd be taken off YouTube if I did. A reminder, people paid $50 to watch this online and say in a private chat room what they would normally say for free on Twitter or Facebook. In what should have been one of the most solemn moments during a very bizarre night of fights, a woman in the audience began yelling anti-mask rhetoric during the 10-bell salute to honor the victims of 9/11. She was promptly escorted out, but unfortunately the damage had already been done, and the entire crowd spent that moment of silence booing the woman until security got involved and removed her. As for the fighters, Vitor Belfort did a pre-fight promo where he addressed the spectators and said, "Let's make America great again," much to the delight of the raving Trumpers. Interesting how so many pro-Trump conservatives criticize other professional athletes for speaking out on social justice issues, but seem to have no problem when they indulge in their MAGA love inside of a venue like this. It's worth noting that Holyfield was a replacement for Oscar De La Hoya, who was forced to withdraw from this match due to coming down with COVID. You remember COVID, right? The disease that Trump said would be gone by Easter 2020? One of Trump's favorite words is huge, and that describes the difference between him addressing the nation versus how he came off on this night. The former president's commentary was far from insightful, but it was inoffensive and felt like the conversation you'd have at a bar with a nice old man who just likes to watch a good, clean fight. He clearly enjoyed himself, especially when chatting with JDS about the differences between boxers and MMA fighters, and his natural rapport with these warriors proved once again that maybe he did miss his true calling. At the very least, we got to spend a few hours with a much more genuine version of Trump, where he wasn't lying, race-baiting, or ranting about the topics he has far less knowledge about than he does about the squared circle.